Hey everyone, I'm Kunal Bajwa.
And I'm Lance Jordan.
We are two nerds who decided to start a podcast in 2020 due to the pandemic. No topic is necessarily off the table, and we'd like you to join us in hearing our thoughts on various topics, ranging from anime to Zeppelins. We have it all. Here we go.
Welcome to another edition of They Need a Hobby podcast.
That's right. How y'all doing today?
They can't respond to you.
That's true. But I wanted to yes and what was going on. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I guess they're cool. But how was your weekend, man?
It was good. It was good. I got some McDonald's, and
Did you get the Travis Scott meal?
I did not get a Travis Scott meal.
Wow.
I should have.
Yeah, $6.
It was, I should have done that, but I got some, they actually got my order wrong, but I wasn't mad. They were supposed to give me like pancakes, sausage, egg, and a biscuit. They just ended up giving me a biscuit, like some scrambled eggs, but they forgot to give me the pancakes. So I was not happy about that, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to complain because I still had a good breakfast. And talked to a friend, hung out with a friend that came out here, socially distanced, of course, and everything. And then I had a Dungeons and Dragons session with some friends, some other friends, and then kind of chilled the rest of the night.
Okay.
So yeah,
It was a very eventful weekend.
yeah. And then now I'm here with you, man, on September
13th?
Yeah, it's the September 13th.
Yeah.
2020.
Yeah. I mean, my weekend.
Yeah, how was yours?
Well, I'll go a little bit further up, and we talked about it a little bit off air. I went to see Tenet.
Yes.
Went back into the movie theaters for the first time.
Yeah, how was that?
Since COVID. The experience as a whole was pretty nice. I think they had it about together as they possibly could.
Okay.
The movie, though.
Yeah, how was that? Like Christopher Nolan usually doesn't disappoint. How did he do?
So here's my thing. Here's my take on it.
Oh boy.
I love how the actors, so I'm giving kudos to everyone who acted in this movie. I love how they acted like they knew what the fuck they were talking about in this movie. Because I would say close to the halfway mark, maybe a little bit before,
Mm-hmm.
I did not know what was going on in the movie at all. I was completely lost. I didn't know what they were looking for. I don't know why they were looking for it. I didn't even understand the science behind it all.
To be fair, I had to watch Inception at least twice to understand how the technology worked officially.
This is 10 times worse than Inception.
Oh God, okay, because they can go back in time of sorts.
They can, and I'm gonna butcher this, but who cares?
Chop away.
They can invert themselves.
Okay.
In a way, and I guess it's like time travel. And I won't spoil it for you, but there's like at least 2, maybe 3 scenes actually where they're going forward. Like, so you're going forward in time, but they're also seeing. Damn, I don't even know how to explain this. But there's a scene where the people who just arrived presently, they're seeing the aftermath of the event that they're trying to
invert.
To stop. Yeah, invert.
Okay.
So it's kind of interesting in that way, but they're able to do it in a way that it doesn't like spoil anything or like.
Okay.
So you don't know the results of, the movie, even though they're telling it
as it happens.
Yeah.
So is this told in real-time perspective, or is it a story that's told in the past?
It's told well, that's the thing. At the end, Robert Pattinson character says like this line, where he's telling, I think his name is John David Washington.
Yeah, it's Denzel's son.
Yeah. Like he tells him that, for you, this is the beginning, but for me, this is the end. And so,
okay.
so it's very.
He's probably practicing for his role as Batman to be so cryptic.
That was very cryptic, but like I said, it was very well acted.
Okay, good.
It just got to the point for me where I was just enjoying the action sequences and just what I could take away from it.
Okay.
but I don't have like no feeling towards the movie. Like I won't say it's a bad movie. I just can't explain to you what happened in the movie.
You're still digesting.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I would probably have to see it again, but I probably still wouldn't get it.
Okay.
But other than that, and we were talking about this also off air, the Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah, Tsushima. How you beat Tsushima this morning?
Yeah, I actually beat it before I came here.
That's how you do it, kids. You wake up and you play games.
Play games.
Hey, play games every day.
I had actually got to the end before I played it today. It was enjoyable. It was definitely an enjoyable ride. I love the combat sequences. I love how the game adapts to your play style, which was something I kind of knew going in.
That's pretty cool.
I didn't know the full effects of it. So we know he's a samurai, but at the same time, he's following down this path without honor, like kind of using stealth and thief-like assassin maneuvers that samurai, I guess, apparently
frown upon.
They frown upon it.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the more you do those type of maneuvers in the game, it affects how the world views you, how the enemies view you, and like just how the island reacts to you overall. Because
right,
I found out later, like playing through the game, that there's more thorns on the island the more you choose to go down the ghost path instead of the samurai path.
Okay, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, so I was definitely following down that path. So I was wondering if there are like differences in the story if you choose to, not go down that path. So it might be worth playing again to see what I can
do the second time.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm wondering, are you a Ronin in the game, or specifically? Do they say that you're specifically a Ronin?
You're not really called a Ronin until spoiler alerts, till the end, really. Because before you're kind of working as a samurai, trying to get the samurai back in the position to fight, and then there's this conflict with your uncle that unfolds, where that's where they start disemboweling him, like not claiming him as a samurai and frowning upon his actions.
Right. Okay.
So yeah.
Gotcha. That sounds cool. It's a game I need to get.
Yeah, it's definitely something to add to the
never-ending list.
Yeah, the never-ending list of game.
Yeah, there's still a bunch I have in my backlog, but that's one game that looks beautiful, and I've heard nothing but good things about.
Mm-hmm.
I even saw, I think I sent you this too. Looks like I may have mentioned in the earlier episode. Basically, there was a guy who was I think he had a doctorate in the Japanese language, and they showed him some gameplay, and then I think they later on had some videos of him playing. You may have seen black hair. I think he had an English accent.
Yeah, you sent me that video.
Yeah. And he was talking about he seemed pretty happy with what they were doing for the most part. He said it was pretty accurate to what was really going on, and apparently it's an island that's closest to Korea out of Japan. So I don't know which island specifically that is in Japan. And then they showed him some gameplay, and of course, part of it was real, part of it didn't make any sense for distancing and whatnot like that, but that's neither here nor there. I did hear that your code name is called like the Shadow or the Ghost.
Ghost.
Hence the name Ghost.
Yeah.
Okay, my bad. Should have seen that one coming a mile away. Or would I, since he's a ghost? Anyhow, bad jokes aside. Would you give this a Lance out of 10 out of 10 or something? Or 9 out of 10? Do you want to do a number rating?
Ooh. I'll give it an 8.
Okay. Still pretty good.
I think when you compare it to what you can compare it to, which is Red Dead, Grand Theft Auto, Assassin's Creed, I think there is a little bit missing.
Okay.
In terms of like the full experience. Like I would say the world is probably on equal footing with Red Dead, Grand Theft Auto, Assassin's Creed, but there was like a little stiffness to his movements. There was a lot of it became really repetitive.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think certain games can mix it up a little bit better. But overall, I mean, I think the combat was really well done.
Okay.
I think they actually made you, put you in the shoes of a samurai. It was just a lot of the repetitiveness in it.
Yeah.
Was kind of the killer for me. I kind of like the things I've seen in other games as well. Also kind of hurt it, but it wasn't a bad thing because these are things I enjoy. But other than that, one thing also too that I forgot to mention in the last podcast was Canal has this new space and it's coming around looking really nice.
Yeah,
coming
thanks, together. Man. Essentially, Lance, you think the game's pretty good. Maybe it could be greased a little bit. I heard they're talking about a sequel.
I know they're talking about a multiplayer.
Okay.
Where there's 4 different classes and essentially you complete missions together. So there's a multiplayer.
Couch co-op or like online?
Online, it's kind of...
Okay. Bring back the co-op couch days.
Yeah. Those aren't coming back.
They will be. It's the last thing I do. They will come back. But yeah, I got this new place. It's awesome. Finally got my TV mounted, so it's no longer 1995. It's now 2020. And place is coming together. And I'm really happy. It's been a long month. It's been a long month of just like moving, packing, buying new stuff, trying to sell old stuff, and then not being successful.
I saw your $20.
Yeah, if anyone wants a pull-up bar, help a brother out.
$20 for a pull-up bar.
That's right.
Aiming high. I like it.
Hey, man. I got that thing for like maybe $40.
$40?
Yeah, they were like one of the high-end ones.
Oh.
Yeah.
That is high.
Well, I think they may have included shipping or not. But anyhow, regardless. So, Lance, I'm excited about today's podcast.
Yeah, that's right. So, on this week's episode...
Probably the longest intro we've ever done.
I know. Just nonsense. But anyway, on this week's episode of They Need a Hobby podcast, we're going to take a break from the nerdiness and we're going to talk instead about comedy, and not just any comedy, improv comedy.
Oh, yeah.
And instead of searching for a guest, we already have a guest among us, my co-host, Kanal. And now Kanal is going to tell us, about his journey in improv, what it was like. This was something I was surprised to learn about Kanal when I found out.
I think your words were like when we were hanging out and talking. I think one of the first couple of times we hung out, like this past year. I was like, yeah, I made an offhand comment that I did improv. And then I remember you being just looking aghast. Like, oh, I didn't know this. And then you added on, it was like, I just got to wine and dine you more and I'll find out more and more about you.
That's my problem. I never wine and dine enough.
That's right. I mean, he wines and dines.
Yeah.
To be fair, you wine and dine.
But it's an essential skill, There's a certain technique. But we're here now.
He wined and dined me well. I'm talking about it now. I'm ready to go.
Before we really get into your experience, for people who might not know, tell me what the difference is between maybe comedy, stand-up comedy, and improv. So tell me what improv is.
Yeah, sure. Improvisational comedy, basically. Today I was preparing for it, and so I decided not to write any notes. I just decided to go in the full spirit of everything, just to go literally off the top of my head, which is pretty much how improv works. It's like Keegan-Michael Key, I was watching a video with him. He says, he gives a pretty good example that I like. It's like you're talking to someone and learning about them, and you both are in this world, or you and a number of people on stage are in this world that you are finding out more and more as you're walking backwards. So like you could be talking about like, hey, Jim, how's it going today? And then your scene partner goes like, oh, terrible since my car broke down. So like, okay, you've established that Jim is probably a coworker of sorts, probably somewhere, but you haven't explored that completely yet. Mm-hmm. You're still walking backwards and finding more and more into the scene. So it's essentially talking to another person at the top of your head and always acknowledging and what we like to call yes-anding them, which is where like you say something, they accept that and then build upon it. And then you just make a scene off of it. The difference between that and stand-up comedy is like stand-up comedy is usually well rehearsed. They have it all memorized in their head. and then they go out on stage and tell jokes. And I think I've done a couple open mics, and I have noticed people, like, they'll say a joke and then they'll react to the crowd a little bit and make a small joke and then come back to their material, which is why stand-up is really hard, because you have to hold that information all in your head and then play it to the crowd. Whereas, like, improv, you are playing to the crowd of one suggestion that they give you, because that's how everything in improv pretty much starts. Starts from a suggestion from the audience.
Okay. And can you tell us about, your first day?
Yeah.
You're in the improv class. How does that go for Kanal?
How does that go for Kanal? So definitely grew up watching a lot of, like, fun comedy. Me and my family, me and my brother, Men in Tights, you name it. We watched it in the 90s, Spaceballs, all that funny stuff. And so then also one of them was Whose Line Is It Anyway? Okay. That was on, like, ABC Family for those who grew up in the millennium 90s kind of era.
Doesn't that still come on?
Yeah, so they remade it on ABC, and instead of Drew Carey hosting it, it's Aisha Tyler. Yeah. But it's the same people. But yeah, so that was the very classic show that showed up at that time. And I was just always astounded by how they could pull up everything on the top of their heads and just make all these scenes right then and there. And that is short form improv. So that was cool to watch as a fun game. So that's what I kind of thought going into everything, is like, oh, that's what improv is. So that's the short preamble. And then the short as I can make it. So come college, I find out that there's an improv team. And I was like, oh, hell yeah. I'm totally going to join up with this. I've always wanted to do this. So I was a 17-year-old fresh-faced freshman that showed up there. And I came there. I remember, like, sitting in the stand in this theater, which we were borrowing it from the theater department. And I remember getting there, and oh boy, a lot of memories are flooding in right now. Essentially, I get up there, and I remember my armpits are just, like, sweating. I'm like shaking, but I'm like, fuck it, I'm gonna fucking go up there and say something. There's gonna be a lot of swearing in this episode by me, and I'm not sorry. And I get up there, and I'm with this girl, and I say something, and I was like, okay, I say something funny, Kunal. And so I was like, do you know which way the weight room is? And I think she just kind of left or something. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. I said something on the top of my head, and I made somebody laugh. Right. I don't think I did exactly what I was supposed to for the exercise we were doing, because she didn't really have a whole lot to say. Yeah. But it was my first experience of like, oh, I can make people laugh by whatever's here. So that was cool. Okay. Yeah.
And so what was, like, the structure of the class, or, like, what was the plan, like, of the group?
So there's two kind of portions of whenever I took classes for improv. One was when I just told you, one was in college for 4 years. And then the other one was, like, after college when I did it with the improv shop. And that was, like, done by professionals who had learned in Second City and then brought it back to St. Louis. So the structure of how, like, college improv worked was basically every Friday we'd meet from, like, 5 to 7. And then we did a bunch of short form games. So these were, like, scenes from the hat, lines, which is where, like, you actually have the audience write down a bunch of lines and we don't see them. And then we're, like, set up in a scene. We get a prompt of where we're going to meet and everything, or what we're doing. And then as we're just talking to each other, we'll say lines. And those lines could be like, yeah, it's like when that dog crossed the road or something. And then you carried on and went on with it's like, oh yeah, Billy, I'm glad Karen, your dog, made it across the street. And then you kind of have a scene from right there and go forward and forward. And then for the improv shop, it was more like, at that time there was 5 levels. Now there's a lot more because they've expanded, gotten more students. Go to the St. Louis Improv Shop off of Shodo and 40 after this whole pandemic is over. They're still doing stuff on their website, and I love all those guys out there. And every level was divided up into different parts of improv. So, like, heralds, which are basically like a long form version of game. And again, the improv shop was all long form, so they would practice everything to do for long form games, where it would be like doing heralds, where you'd have one prompt, and then you'd build as a group of 10 people, have one thing, and then 3 little subplots that go through that. You'd regroup, another main point, 3 sub points, come back as a group, and then the third and final sub point, and then additional sub points to those, and then you'd come back and close it. And that would be done all in 1 hour off of one prompt. It is a very, very hard skill. It's a lot of energy, but you do get really, really good at improv. Scene building, listening to your partners, those are all kind of things we built on in levels in the improv shop and improv games. Going back to the college days, we kind of just ran a bunch of short form games and then eventually incorporated long form improv.
Okay.
Where you're like pausing people, tagging people out, or saying like, yeah, it reminds me of the days when I was a teacher, and someone on the team will yell, flashback to when you're a teacher, and then you'd make a whole new scene right from there.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a bit of a disjointed explanation, but that's what I have right now.
It's all good. It's all good. But any more like memorable stories from your time with either?
Yeah, I remember once, well, like your mindset is all about improv, like how you go into it. You have to be willing to say yes. You have to be willing to just be ready to fail. You have to be ready to fail. You have to be ready to follow the fear, as like one of the modern founders of improv, Del Close, says, follow the fear, and you'll find that brings you to very interesting places. There was one very big part. Was like I was improving in a college game, and then all of a sudden, like someone in the crowd yells for my prompt. He's like, "Sunshine comes out of your ass." And so some like I know exactly, right? And I was like, okay, all right, fine, let's do it. And so the entire time I was like walking on all fours with my ass pointed at everyone in the game. And one person left, and they were the person that was, quote unquote, it was called party games. And they left, and when they come back, they have to figure out who everyone is that joined the party. So I actually like knocked on the fake door. And then I was just like walking in backwards, like with my ass pointed to everybody. And I was the last person he could get because he was just trying to figure out what was going on. And the hijinks kind of ensue from just your interactions of being that said character. Yeah. That was incredibly memorable. And improv is usually really, really fun whenever you base it off of like true life or whenever it kind of mirrors true life. Like there was one point where I remember like going to the barbershop and this guy was like, yeah, so what kind of music do you listen to? And I go, like, well, this happened at a wedding once where I forgot the name of the song. And this is totally true. I was a groomsman in this wedding, and I really wanted to hear this song, but at the moment I couldn't remember the name. So I started doing the Carlton dance. And everyone just starts laughing because they know what I'm talking about, but I clearly forgot at that moment. That was fun, and it was really cool to see that kind of unfold. The problem is, and this is very true, you'll go up on stage, do it, and then the moment you get off, you'll just leave, and everything kind of just drops off. And then like an hour later, like, oh yeah, I remember that scene. So a lot is going through your head as you're doing that. But because it's so much fun, it's all good. Yeah. So yeah, there's another time I had to voice Squidward and talk about that. That was just fun. Apparently I made someone cry laughter so much that he joined the team afterwards.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool.
How well did he end up doing?
He ended up being one of our best people, really? In my opinion. Juan, if you're out there listening, I love you. We're still good friends, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah,
Is he still participating?
Last that I know, currently he is a teacher. Currently he just got engaged, actually.
Oh.
Yeah,
nice.
So good for him. Yeah, he and I got along pretty well. He was a couple years younger than me, but yeah. I wish I got to see more of him. Yeah, you make some good friendships too.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
So other than sunshine and assholes, what other material were you guys covering?
Oh, typically it would be whatever would be going on at the time, like or whatever would be kind of pertinent, whatever we would get from the crowd. Right. It would be politics. It would be. I think the Sochi Olympics was going on at that time, and so someone made a reference to like, what about Ryan Lochte peeing in the pool? And so we made a whole sketch about that. I don't remember what happened because we did so many. Then there was one of my first times playing. We were practicing for short form, and someone was like, "Yeah, like." They threw the reference that just said Saw. And so the character just talked of like, I want to play a game the whole time in Jigsaw's voice. And so that was fun. There can be a lot of drama in improv groups.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if we want to go down that road because there's a lot of drama.
I mean, this is what the podcast is for.
Yeah.
So what was going on in these groups you had? Was it alpha dog mentality going on? Or?
So I will fully admit that I definitely made a lot of mistakes. And there are things that I did there that I probably would not do now just from being a healthier human being. There was definitely a lot of jokes I got away with just because I was a person of color, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Did a couple Asians accents and got away with that quite a bit. I definitely could throw as many Indian jokes as I wanted to.
Yeah.
It was kind of funny because like I was the only brown kid there at the time. And there was maybe one that joined up for a short time, but then didn't stick with it. There is an alpha mentality that sometimes does show up. I probably did that once or definitely more than once or twice. I was using it as a way to deal with a lot of problems. Mm-hmm. And after leaving college, I definitely realized that. And every once in a while, I definitely like regret how I acted in college. But then I remember when I left college and went to the improv shop, I was like, okay, this is my chance to somewhat redeem myself. And I kind of did.
And that's why you went to the improv shop?
Yeah, because I missed it. I loved it. I loved the laughter, the rush of performing.
Mm-hmm. And what's the time gap from when you were...
Time gap? Oh, yeah, it was about...
In college to when you got to the improv shop.
So I graduated in 2014. I go to the improv shop at 2015.
Okay.
And basically stick with them and stick in that world until like 2017. And I loved all those 3 years of doing it. And I went through their whole entire... I'm technically a graduate of the program, so I can go, I go back there and I get a discounted price to take any of the classes, which is pretty cool. And they've expanded. They've got a bigger place now.
Yeah.
But yeah, they used to be out in the Central West End. And the experience in college was like, it was a place where I could, you know what, I'm being too defensive. I'm gonna kind of open up a little bit on this episode if that's okay. I often worry too much about what people think, but...
You know, the people who listen to this podcast are supposed to be our friends. So,
that's right.
You know, if you can't be vulnerable with your friends...
You know what? Let's do it. I'm going to pull down the shield a little bit. I don't know why I've been keeping it up in the first place. So, yeah, it was a place for me where I was able to blow off steam every week. I was finally out in a setting outside of high school where I was like... always quiet, always kind of kept my head down, always, did the right thing. And I did not like my high school experience. Could have been better. I should have changed schools a long time ago. But essentially, I didn't really have my voice. This was one of the places where I found my voice. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, realizing that I needed some mental health, assistance and help. And beginning that journey really at the end of high school. That was one of the therapeutic things I did to help me kind of get through college. And granted, I needed to take further steps, but for where I was, for what I was doing, it made a lot of sense. It was one place where I could get laughs from people.
Yeah.
And feel really good about myself. Now I would say that I have a lot of hidden talent, but like back then I was like, oh, I'm cool.
Right.
Which now I think is very problematic. But for then, definitely helped me survive. It helped me get through rough parts of my life.
So during college, did you find that other people in the group were going through the same things, or were they looking for other?
That's a really good question. I think definitely people do that, and in college specifically, maybe they did. I would have to look at those memories in another lens, honestly.
Yeah,
I would definitely say that I have seen that. Yeah,
right on.
Yeah, because it's cheaper than therapy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Laughter is the best medicine.
It is. And as cliche as that statement sounds, it is very true. I mean, it is the best medicine. It's the freest medicine. You can go on YouTube. You can go to live theater. Go support live theater. Or if they do charge, it's usually a pretty nominal fee. We like entertaining people. Yeah. We like putting on a show for someone. It's fun at the end of the day. Mm. It's a way for people to deal with their problems. And if that's the only thing you do, that could be dangerous depending on the severity of the issue. But I definitely think it can help. And it definitely helped me out tremendously. I was always that annoying kid in college who invited people to his improv show.
Yeah.
That trope that people made fun of is 100% true.
Did anybody show up?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. When we first started, it was kind of a Rebels Without a Cause group. There were a lot of people there who were coming that were friends of a very rebellious kind of Kurt Vonnegut fight the system. And they had this goody-goody two-shoes that shows up with them. But I had a really raunchy sense of humor. And so I kind of got along with them. And it was kind of funny because as soon as they kind of graduated out, I was significantly younger than them, at least 2 to 3 years. Then the new group that comes in was, and I went to Catholic University. Yeah, I went to SLU, and yeah, totally, it is a Jesuit college, and there are people of the Christian faith there. But I felt that it, after a while, was taken over by the micro organization. And I'm not here to knock the micro organization, but the humor, in some ways, was dialed down because they wouldn't be as raunchy.
Yeah.
There was one time I posted the Black Jeopardy sketches from Saturday Night Live, which, like, they're hilarious, right?
Yeah.
Especially the one with T'Challa when T'Challa, rest in peace, came on there and did it. And I posted it, and one of the members from that group was like, I don't know about this sketch. It seems kind of risque. I'm like, what?
Right.
This is hilarious. It's written by I'm pretty sure Kenan Thompson was like the head writer on that for that sketch particularly. I was considered raunchy after all those rebels left and the micro organization was there, and so it was kind of a weird dynamic that I had with them, which is probably why I was a little more braggadocious than I wanted to be, a little more obnoxious than I would like to remember. It did get a little odd at some points.
Okay.
But, I definitely loved all those kids there, and I wanted to perform the best with them.
Mm.
I learned that I took it a bit too seriously, and if you take things that people do for fun too seriously, unless they are on the same page with you, you're fighting an uphill battle. That's kind of what happened to me. I burnt out quite a bit. That's why I took a year break, and then
from doing it,
and then medically and physically had to get back on track.
Yeah,
which I'm doing a lot better, thankfully. When I touch wood right now with my foot.
So in college.
Yeah.
What crowds were you like performing to?
So when we first started, it was like maybe 10 to 15 people in this audience. This was held in the Black Box Theater out in Xavier Hall in SLU's campus. And so that's like in the Humanities building where everyone goes. Mm. We used to say that touchdown Jesus because there's a statue of Jesus with his arms. It's like the one from Dogma where instead of Buddy Jesus where he's just pointing at you with 2 finger guns, he's like has 2 hands up like a touchdown, like someone just tore a touchdown. And so you'd go there, take a right, and then hit the wall and take another right, and you'd be at the Black Box Theater. Yeah. So that's where we practiced and performed many times. We also performed in Studio A or B. That was upstairs. But the Black Box Theater was the magic. And that could seat 100 people. Mm-hmm. It didn't look like it, but it could totally seat 100 people. We would practice there, play there. So it started from like 10 people. And then by the time I was a junior, this really touched my heart when it happened. Like I got to see that SGA came to us one time because the place was getting packed. And they were like, okay, this is a fire hazard. Mm. So we were like, okay, this is a great problem to have. Not for people being stuck in a fire, but for us because we're getting more attention. We're getting more people to come. And we'd never charged anybody. It was a free show. Because that was the whole point. They might be charging them now. I have no idea. Mm.
Were you guys ever like covered by the school paper or anything?
I believe
like that?
So. Yeah, a couple times. From what I remember, I don't remember getting interviewed at all like that. But I think by now they've been in the paper or like our shows have been talked about. So when we were told we were a fire hazard, we split the shows into 2 shows. So one at 5 and one at 6.
Mm. Really professional comedy though, right?
Yeah, dude. It seriously, man. It started growing, and that was really cool for me to see. Yeah, and really cool to be a part of that, to be a part of the reason that happened too. And then people were like, "We have an improv group." I'm like, "Yeah, it's been here for like 10 years almost. Where have you been?" We actually opened for we opened for Kate McKinnon when she came and visited.
Really?
Yeah, and there's a funny story with me on that too. We were called to open for...
Who made the call for you to open for?
So that was the funny part. Like I was VP at the time, but I didn't hear about this until like the night before because they were just walking by and they found out, the president and the treasurer found out. And there was not really good communication between us. And so I found out the night before, and I'm like, how come I didn't know about this? He's like, I just found out about it when we did it. And I'm like, okay, I should have been notified about this, but I wasn't. So I see them open for it, and I have the weirdest luck whenever a famous person or a comedian comes into town and they're like looking for a volunteer. I have the best luck for getting on stage. I have the worst luck for what I say next. And so Kate McKinnon, she's like, I need a volunteer from the stand. I deadlock eyes with her and I raise my hand. And she's like, you. And I'm like, me? Like, and I point by myself. She's like, yes, the one that's pointing to himself. Come up there. Yeah. I came up there. And she totally asked me what a billiken was. And I gave an explanation that I was told years ago. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, it's like the leprechaun. And the devil had a son. And then she like looks at me, looks at the crowd, and she goes, is that true? And the entire audience goes, no. And I'm like, fuck. Because this is what I was told.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And then apparently she found out like I was just really awkward and everything. Well, I was just kind of goofy because I think she's really funny in SNL. And I think she's really funny as a actress and whatnot. I don't think her stand-up and 100% stand-up is hard. Stand-up is hard to do. I didn't think her stand-up was that great. Okay. I think parts of it were, but not really. So I would kind of like make it easier for her to make fun of me when I got on stage to kind of help her. But I'm sure she's, gotten tremendously better then. I wasn't a huge fan of it, but I still am a fan of her. I want that to be clear. I loved her work on the Venture Brothers, which show that just got canceled. Yeah. And it's kind of funny because I got up there and I was like, hey, as I was leaving, I was like, put my arms out for a hug. She totally gave me a hug. And I was like, I think she had no choice because I was on stage with her. Yeah. But I felt bad about that afterwards. I was like, I didn't mean to force her to give me a hug, but oh well. Yeah, as I was leaving the stage, I'm like, hey, I love your work on the Venture Brothers. And she looks at me like I'm from Mars and she goes, oh, thank you. Because apparently not many people come up to her and say that because they don't really know that she's on that show. She's one of the secondary characters, but still.
Gotcha. And you don't recall your sketch for opening for her?
So I didn't open for her. That was the funny part. All of my other team opened for her. Okay. But I got called up. And then afterwards, when she finished up, one of the guys told her, I was like, oh yeah, that's our vice president. And she was like, what? She was so thrown off by that. And then someone even asked me, like, were you a plant? I'm like, no, I wasn't a plant.
Yeah. Oh, man. That's great.
Yeah, it was funny.
So fast forwarding to the St. Louis Improv Shop, right? Yeah. You're signing up for classes. How do you approach those classes knowing that you did improv for college, doing it for 4 years?
Yeah, I approached it knowing like, okay, dial it down a little bit. Kind of like Luther Answer Translator, like dial it down a little bit. Mm-hmm. Instead of being a 7, be like a 5. And so I brought it down. I grounded myself a little more. Yeah. I knew going in, I would know a lot more than a lot of people. One of my good friends who I'm still in touch with now, she's a teacher out in Philadelphia, full PhD, everything. I actually just talked to her a couple months ago. I need to check in with her again. Melissa Ford, she goes by Missy. And she was like, I'm only going to do this if you do this. And I'm like, hell yeah, let's totally do this. So we both signed up for classes. We both were in the same first 2 levels together. Mm-hmm. And it was cool to have a comrade with me like that and just kind of be there at the same time. We both knew what we were doing more so than the rest of the people there, which is to be expected.
Yeah, because it was like an introduction classes.
Right. And there actually was a level 0 at the time, but we're like, we don't need to take that. We know the basics. Like we know the basics. Let's hit it. Let's hit it hard. And we did it. And a guy named Andy Slowey, shout out to him, was teaching our class at that time. And it was cool because he was a gamer as well. Mm-hmm. So he and I got along pretty well. Okay. Off the bat. But answering your question, going into that, my mindset was don't repeat what you did in college. Right. Be better. Be closer to who you are. Mm-hmm. And I had a lot more fun doing that.
Okay. So you were closer overall with the group that you were with? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm still Facebook friends with them. Most of us in that group carried on with the same people for every level. Mm-hmm. So we actually formed our own group for a while and performed.
And what was that group called?
It was called Gooey Butterfly for a while.
How did we come up with this name?
So just like any improv name, it's always fucking weird and obnoxious and very, very singular to the mindset of the group. And I think someone just came up with it's like we're like a butterfly that has blossomed. Gooey butterfly, like gooey butterfly cake. It's a gooey cake that you can have in St. Louis. Mm-hmm. That's how the name came. Yeah, is what I remember. And yeah, we performed a couple times
in the improv shop.
Yeah, so like in order to graduate in that program, on the 5th level, you actually perform. Mm-hmm. You have 5 performances.
All right, tell us about these 5.
I mean, they happened like almost 4 years ago, so I will try my best. But yeah, it's essentially we work on a different form every class, and then we go and performed it. And then I do remember, and so in the last session, in the last level, you kind of perfect your own version of the Herald, or a version of an improv long form game that you will present for a show. The next class is when we kind of go over what we did right, what we did wrong, how can we do better next time. Yeah, I noticed that I was starting to fall into old habits of pigeonholing or trying to be cute and funny, and I realized that was killing a lot of the scenes. And then the moment I reined it back and brought it into working with the scene partners instead of trying to be funny all the time, because there's a classic story with like I think Jane Fonda and someone else, and they're performing on stage. Jane Fonda says, "I need to talk to you. We need a divorce." And she goes, "Why do you want a divorce?" She's like, "Well, it's time for us to leave, and I think it's time for us to do it." She's like, "What about the children?" And Jane Fonda goes, "What children?" And it's a great laugh, right? But you've effectively torpedoed the entire scene, and we can't go any further from it. That's one thing that I definitely remember preparing for those classes. Just trying to be better about that.
Well, there anything that you wouldn't touch while doing improv, like any subject or any topic at all?
They basically told us for college improv, since 1, it was a Jesuit school, and 2, we're in Missouri. They basically said like no rape jokes and no abortion jokes, which I was pretty much okay with. I was fine with that. I was totally fine with that.
No pushback there.
We had a weird rule about lumberjacks because it always turned into anal sex, no matter what happened.
What?
Yeah, because no matter what, whenever we had a lumberjack thing, we just never did that because it always turned into like Brookback Mountain or something.
Wow.
Yeah, and then stayed away from terrorism. There was one guy that made a 9/11 joke and almost killed the show.
Yeah, and what time was this during?
This
wasn't close to.
No, this was like 2012, 2011. But he recovered really quickly and everyone forgot about it after that. We weren't allowed to do, stuff that wouldn't be too crazy for you not to do in a college campus. So definitely don't make fun of mentally retarded people or Down syndrome, stuff like that. And I know like topics like that have been coming under fire because like, we don't have any freedom of speech anymore. But I'm like, it's a college campus. Do we really have to go that edgy? Like, they definitely said, be careful with race jokes. I got that kind of like gray zone comedy where I could go and do race jokes because I could get away with it. So totally to do that. For the improv shop, not so much. As long as you were decently respectful, nothing was really off the mark. They might have specific rules now, but I don't think they had any back then. I think it was mainly just be respectful, but be funny. Which I think is good because the moment you start putting those rules up, then that's when they will potentially not be too happy about it. But they kept it pretty free reign and everyone was pretty friendly with each other. So it wasn't a problem. Yeah. Yeah. It was more like the atmosphere that they presented was very like vulnerable and open and everything. Like, okay, you can be funny, but there was no real worry for that. And vulnerability was a big part of building in that. There's a program we did right in the first level. And they say like vulnerability will be, as you're saying today, we got to be vulnerable in this podcast. I always say we whenever I'm talking about myself because I'm royalty apparently. So we will do this now.
Well, if people, we won't give the location, but if they haven't seen the apartment, there's some indications of royal blood.
Royal blood. I was a king, and many, many lifetimes ago. Regardless, there was this thing called a vulnerability circle, which is where like everyone said something that you wouldn't say to acquaintances or strangers, but maybe not even friends, but just something that you wouldn't say normally, like, oh, I don't clean my sheets every week, or I don't really check to see if I've parked well. The whole goal of the assignment was to like, get us to be upfront, to be real with people. So our teacher went first and told a bunch of stuff about, in respect of keeping what was said there private. I'll give examples, but I won't give directly what happened. But he was talking about like, what his struggles were in his own life. And then eventually someone got up and said, this is really hard for me right now because I'm intoxicated. And you could tell that they were very distraught and they wanted to be vulnerable, but they were having a really hard time doing that. And then after that, it really set the tone of like everyone talking about like their deep, dark secrets that come out. Like one of them had lost a partner from a heart attack and how it still bothers them from day to day. Things were coming out of the closet and it got really heavy. It got really cool. Another person had not talked to certain parts of their family or not talked to their parents or something, or had known someone that committed suicide and they were the last person they talked to. And so, there was a lot of heavy stuff that went on there. I'll share some of mine. Like I was basically talking about how insecure I was about, myself, or how insecure I felt about dating, or felt if I even was worth dating. And then I tried to go around the circle and kind of talk to the person that shared something before me to be like, hey, like I know what you kind of feel like, and I've been there myself. I consider myself to be very sensitive. One guy was like, yeah, I cry all the time, and I feel like I'm less of a man for talking about this and everything. And I'm like, hey man, I cry a lot too, and I've been called like a teenage girl. I've been told that I way oversensitive than I should be, and it was cool to have that level of camaraderie where everything kind of just fades away and you're just with the other person and you got their back.
Yeah.
And that's where we kind of left away with. So like the examples I've given were real examples, and I'm protecting their names out of respect to the people there. The takeaway we got was, this is the circle. Everyone has their stuff that they've thrown in it, and we know each other a lot more.
Yeah. Deeper
this time, and but respect everyone's privacy at the same time. And so it was one way. It was like, he's going through all these things, I've got him, I'm backing him up. It was a way that really built a lot of good social cohesion, and it's something that I really treasure to this day. Just it's so weird that we live in such a protected society. I know it's kind of ironic considering how much I was holding back at the beginning of this episode. Yeah. It just shows how much we're conditioned to it.
Yeah.
It's hard for guys to be emotionally sound, but you can do that and still, love wrestling. You can still do that and still love playing Yakuza, and you can still do that.
Kanal Bajra. A whole podcast, and sure enough, Yakuza makes it.
That's right, man. That's right. But it's hard enough. I respect anyone that gets up on stage, even if they bomb, because you're being vulnerable and you're putting yourself out there.
Right.
And no matter what happens, even if they're not funny, forget even being offensive or something like that. Even if they're not funny, like they'll still get somewhat of an applause from me, because it takes a lot to get up there and try to make people laugh, because it's next to doing brain surgery for stand-up, for improv, because once you get on there and you see the spotlight on you, there's just a different kind of fear that's up there. And if you're with people that really help you out, that fear fades.
Yeah. What do you think about the current state of improv right now in 2020? Where do you see it going? How do you think it's doing?
So, I mean, here's the thing that it's interesting that we're talking about it now, as opposed to how I usually go about these episodes, but improv is not really going away. Everybody who's worth their salt has done it in some form or fashion. All the late night hosts, everybody on SNL, everyone who does sketch comedy has done some level of improv. Tina Fey is a huge one out there. Key and Peele. It's actually funny. Their movie Keanu, they had a lot of improv games in it. Like when they try to act all gangster and talk about, have everybody tell their name and like say 3 things about themselves. That's a total improv game.
Yeah.
And so I was dying when I was seeing that scene because I'm like, I know exactly what they're doing.
Okay.
And they're talking about, yeah, we're gonna do some scene building out here. And it was just perfect. I don't see it going away. It is very much a hobby. It's a very big hobby that I used to be a part of, and it's a hobby that makes everything else better.
Yeah.
Honestly, because it teaches you to be creative in a new light and to not stop yourself, to keep on going, to trust yourself, and to trust everyone around you. I've seen a lot of good writers. The 2 girls in Broad City were on UC Berkeley. Yeah.
I actually love Broad City.
Yeah, Broad City is a great show. I think one of my favorite parts is where Abby turns out to be a lounge singer and just kills it on the stage. And both of them met at UCB Berkeley.
Yeah.
In fact, my friend Melissa knew someone from that show who was the one that keeps on getting angry at Alana at the desk. They actually went to college together out in Wellesley. So just a fun random fact.
Random fact. Yeah,
random fact for today. Her name is Nicole Fetcho, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I definitely see it having an effect on everything successful that happens out there. I'm pretty sure Dave Chappelle has done some level of improv. Mm-hmm. To answer your question, it's not going away. It definitely is going to keep on growing.
Yeah.
Bigger and bigger. And if you want to work on acting, if you want to work on stand-up, if you want to work on sketch comedy, do improv. It is something that I don't know if you can make a lifetime of doing unless you're potentially teaching it in like a improv shop format.
Yeah.
But it's something that does accentuate and expand on everything bigger that you will do in your life. I did notice when I was in college doing improv that there was this big back and forth between the theater group and the improv group, which I always found to be very interesting. And it didn't make any sense to me because so many skills are transferable. There was so much heat between those 2 groups for unnecessary reasons. I had no problem with them and they had no problem with me, but certain other people they had significant problems with. Yeah, I mean, we were renting their space. I can't get mad at them if they're going to tell us that we can't perform somewhere. I'm like, we're renting their space. It's going to happen. Like, it's just kind of how the setup is. But sometimes there would be a lot of heads clashing.
Maybe you were drawing bigger crowds.
Maybe I was. Maybe I was.
You're stepping on the wrong toes.
You kick me out, you lose your team. No, there were some great people that performed with me.
That's great. So to wrap it all up, is Kunal possibly looking at a return into improv, or is this the end of the road for him?
No, number one, like I definitely want to go back and stretch my improv wings because they have gotten a little rusty. I did go back in 2018 and 2019 and did some classes with people out there.
Right.
And it was good. It was good to be back. It's funny how rusty you can get for not doing it. Yeah. It's very odd. You have to relearn some skills. It's like doing anything. You don't use it for a while. It kind of goes. And so I definitely want to come back to it. Honestly, right now it's next to impossible.
Right.
Because of
COVID.
Good old Cove.
Cove.
But yeah, definitely it's something I'll do from time to time.
Yeah.
Being a part of an improv team, maybe not because it kind of becomes your life. Mm-hmm. And it should if you're being a performer on that level. You know, you should take it seriously because you're putting a lot of work into it. But I'll come back and do a couple classes here and there.
Definitely. You're going to have to definitely let us know when you get back in there. We're going to catch the show. Yeah. So anything that we didn't cover that you want to speak on?
That's a really good question. Not really. You covered most of it. I really don't think there's anything necessarily that I would miss. I would definitely throw the analogy, like if you like jazz, you like improv because it works a lot like that. Everyone knows the notes, everyone knows the chords, progressions, scales, etc. But doing that free form with a bunch of people, that's where the magic happens. That's where you see the cool stuff. And go do it.
Go do it. Well, as always, it's been a pleasure doing another podcast with you.
Thank you, man.
And to, want to thank you for opening up.
Yeah, thanks for getting me to open up because I feel like if I didn't, it would have been a boring ass episode. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm glad to, learn about this time.
Yeah.
in your life, and I'm sure everybody else will appreciate it as well.
Thank you. Yeah.
So everybody, I think that'll do it for us this week for another episode of They Need a Hobby podcast.
Thanks for joining us, and this is one hobby I used to do.
Hey fan peeps, thanks for joining, and as always, we appreciate any feedback. You can follow us on our Facebook page, They Need a Hobby, and also at TNAH Pod on Instagram and Twitter.
Hopefully one day we'll find a hobby and maybe even be one of the cool kids. Peace.